Hey everybody, today I'm going to be talking about my favorite films of 2023 so far, the first half of the year. I have not seen a ton of movies so far, and the ones that I have seen, I didn't particularly like a lot of them, but there are a few that I think are worth talking about. And of course, as the year progresses, I tend to like the movies in the latter half of the year that I tend to put on my top 10 of the year. But anyway, we will just start with this list, and I'll go with my first film. This is in no particular order, but the first film on my list is Megan, and this was directed by Gerard Johnstone. So this film I actually didn't review because I missed it initially, and I was kind of sad about that, but I was able to catch it on a plane. I really, really enjoyed the film. I found it to be a really refreshing change from a lot of the forgettable shit that I have been seeing lately. What I enjoyed the most about it was just how much fun they seemed to be having and how much fun I was having in terms of my own experience. And the subject is naturally a very topical one that is a real threat right now, the threat of technology and AI and stuff of that nature. But it chose to take that concept and be very playful with it and very mischievous. And I found that to be really appealing, that, that it wasn't some cerebral, deep kind of exploration of like AI and consciousness and all of that sort of stuff, which is, really great. But again, I found this to be just kind of a refreshing change because it is more a horror satire, and it really knows kind of when to stay in its lane and when to get a little funky. It's very concise, very clean. It definitely doesn't overstay its welcome, which I do appreciate, but at the same time, there's part of me that kind of wishes the movie were a little bit meatier, that it stayed maybe just a little bit longer. But I really like that it makes use of the time that it has, and there's a real heart to it, which I really wasn't expecting. And it's really from the very first scene of the movie, there is a really good emotional hook, and you're interested in the characters, you want to follow them. Allison Williams, she in Girls, she plays Marnie. I loved the show Girls when it was on. And then obviously she was in Get Out as the villain. And I think she's just really good at playing despicable characters, but deceptively so. Somehow she's able to bring, even through that kind of slight Valley Girl thing she has going on, she's able to bring a bit of a likability and an intelligence to her characters that somehow keeps her from completely going off the rails. And it keeps her from being distant to the viewer, because I think just as a character, we really need to hate her, especially in the beginning of the film. But, we also need to believe that she can be redeemed in a way that is, that we can all buy into. But the movie really jerks you around in all kinds of very interesting directions tonally, and it'll be very, like emotionally heavy, emotionally engaging, and then it'll just take a really sharp turn and go for something really dark and really brutal, or often very funny. And all of this can all be done in the same breath, which I find to be really interesting, and it really commits to each shift in tone with a real boldness. And all of that just helps the audience to really buy into it. There were times when my mouth was just wide open and where I was laughing like I was afraid the people on the plane would look at me a little strangely. But just the quirky energy to it, I loved. And not every piece of humor in this film lands. There's actually parts of it that I did find to be a little bit weak and maybe a little bit too slight. Like, as an example, I struggled kind of with the Silicon Valley-esque work environment that Allison Williams, like where she has her job, just her boss and some of her co-workers. I don't know, I didn't really buy into them as characters. It just felt kind of cliche, on the nose, and like we didn't really understand that world enough to be able to get creative with it and be able to recognize it kind of for what it is in a more clever way. But I think Megan as a character, I think she is a fantastic villain, one of the better villains I've seen in a while, especially just aesthetically. She is beautifully designed, and it's the kind of design that really stays with you. You do not forget that image of her. And I think why it's so striking and why it's so believable just as an image is because it's a combination of different things. It's a combination of practical effects and special effects, and that's something that I tend to like the most. So it's like a real actress mixed with a puppet and then mixed with the CGI, and all of that, I think when you bring it together, it's believable because there's that element of the real, that element of the fake, and it's just off enough to be unsettling to you, to kind of send chills up your spine. So yeah, I do recommend this one. I think it's a lot of fun. Next on my list is Beau is Afraid. This is directed by Ari Aster, and I'm sure some of you who have actually seen my review for that might be surprised that I have this movie on the list, just because, I struggled with this film. I struggled with it actually a lot, and yeah, I had a lot of complaints about it in my initial review. And I have still only seen the movie once, so, as I said in my review, I could see it multiple times, and my opinion could absolutely change on it, but as I did say in the review, I did expect that the movie wouldn't leave me, and it certainly hasn't. It's one I still can't stop thinking about it, and the strong elements that I initially felt, that I really liked in the movie still really stand out to me as some of the best of the year, but also the elements that didn't work also really stand out in my mind as things that I really wish could have been better. It is an incredibly ambitious film, and there are aspects of it that I found to be really meaty, and I think some of the best work that Ari Aster has ever done. Certainly some of his most interesting and his most ambitious. I think, honestly, one of the more interesting aspects of the film that I feel like not that many people bring up is just the writing. The humor in the script, I think, is just so on point. And I think it does maybe the best job of really bridging the gaps between the horror and the comedy really seamlessly, and I think that is really kind of what Ari Aster is after the most. And there are sequences in the film that are just so edge of your seat gripping, and just the tension of everything, that the filmmaking is just, on another level, I feel like. And then at the same time, I just feel like, as a 3-act film, it didn't really come together for me. It just felt disjointed, and while certain sequences in the movie or certain acts of the movie, I think they really stand well on their own, just kind of out of context. They work almost like little mini films or short films. But when you put them together, again, they're just not quite clicking in place for me, where I feel like the experience of them is really enhancing the themes in a way that's really landing. It almost feels like, even though these sequences are really creative and beautiful, some of them, it's almost like we're getting lost in the monotony of the experiences. And a lot of what is trying to be expressed here thematically just feels very long-winded. As it goes, I think that the ambition of it starts to stifle the meaning. And it starts to feel, especially in the second half, but particularly the third act, it's like there's a lot of padding here that seems to be kind of exploring themes that are fairly simple just as ideas, and it just starts to feel a little bit redundant. Like we're taking the long way round, and we didn't necessarily need to do that. There are ways I feel like we could have done it kind of head on in a more interesting way. In a lot of ways, this movie reminded me of Damien Chazelle's Babylon, which came out last year, a movie that, I still don't shut up about to this day, and that is also a movie that is a 3-hour epic, very ambitious, and yeah, like a very big gamble for the studio. And that movie also had a lot of shortcomings, and yet there are aspects of it that I think is just some of the best filmmaking Damien Chazelle has ever done by far. And I can see Beau is Afraid still sticking out to me, and again, growing even at the end of the year. But again, the things that Ari Aster does very well, he does very, very, very well. And I think, the way he choreographs everything, especially the look, the depths of, just like the set design and everything, the mannerisms of the actors, the way they talk, it's just this nightmarishness, the anxiety that he's able to kind of tap into, I think, with the viewers, and the way that the film really just consumes the entire frame, so you're so immersed in the experience of it. It is some of the most tense and atmospheric filmmaking I think you're going to see so far this year. And, his ability, I think, to blend the social etiquette with kind of the awareness of humor, and then combined with that primal brutality and fear, it's done in a way that I haven't seen before. It feels very Lynchian, it feels very Kubrickian, certainly, but it is very much Aster also. And I do feel when we get into the real symbolic, psychedelic type of stuff, sometimes that can kind of hinder the character development or the thematic development. So we're not really getting into the motivations and what drives these people, which I think would have been an interesting thing to do. Instead, we're just looking at the psychedelia and how it exists, reflecting these more heavy archetypes. And those ideas never quite reach the ground for me. But again, like, I'm so mixed on this movie, and I say that to everybody. I'm very torn. But even with all of my complaints, it is so captivating, and I tell everybody to see the movie because it will linger in your mind in a way that, like a nightmare. And so if you want a really memorable experience, especially if you are an Aster fan, if you liked Hereditary and if you liked Midsummer, I mean, naturally you have to see this one because, again, it's just as interesting, even though it kind of has a few misfires along the way. Next, I'm going with Across the Spider-Verse. This is directed by a lot of people, but honestly, it feels almost like it was made by AI, just because this film, visually, it is one of the most astounding animated American films I have ever seen in my life. For me, this is the best Spider-Man I have ever seen. I think the first ones that ever really came out in my lifetime in terms of like live action and all that was, there were the Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire movies, and I really loved those at the time. But at the time I also felt like maybe this should be animated. Why aren't we doing more animated Marvel movies and DC movies? It just seems so easy, and yet they weren't going in that direction. But this is exactly, Across the Spider-Verse is exactly what I've always wanted to see from Marvel, again, so far as aesthetic and tone and all of that, representing the comic book feel as it was meant to be. And yeah, just again, the movement of live action, the movement of humans and like kind of the darkness, the saturation of the colors and all of that, it just kind of sags to me. It is not the same. And it just feels like with animation, you can create, very crisp, bright, kind of zippy kind of tones and a feeling of a world. And you don't have those same limitations so far as stretching the logic of your characters. In animation, you have so much liberation, do whatever you want, and people will buy into it. And the animation here, I'm telling you, I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop trying to find clips from it online, because if you watch the trailer, it does not do it justice at all. You have to see it on the big screen if you can. It's just a fusion of all kinds of different cultures and styles, and it's so overwhelming naturally because it is a multiverse type of film, and yet it never goes off the rails. It really knows when to kind of build to certain moments and when to have quiet moments, which is something that I really appreciate. I talked about when I reviewed, or I don't know, actually, I didn't review the first one, but I guess I've told people one of my big problems with the original movie, Into the Spider-Verse, were, kind of the test allies and enemies, not really getting to know them that well. Whereas in this one, I felt every single character I was rooting for, I liked. My one big problem with it, though, is the ending of it. I just really don't like it. I had the same issue with Dune, and yes, I know technically this is very much like a comic book movie where it's like, or I should say a comic book where, like you're going and then going, and then you go to the last page and it's like, to be continued. It ends on a cliffhanger. I totally understand that, but I think just from a movie perspective, I like to have some sort of conclusion, where we wrap something up and we're able to transition into another film. Just cutting it off in this way is just really unsatisfying to me. And if you look at movies like Lord of the Rings, all of those end on cliffhangers, and yet they work very well in terms of they feel neat and tidy, the ending works as a conclusion, and it's like you feel satisfied by the end of the movie and ready for the next one. And I feel like that is kind of the tone we need to be kind of trying to strike here. But again, I'm so astounded by the film, and I want everybody to see this movie. I just think it is absolutely brilliant. Everything that Spider-Man should be. And then last but not least, I'm going with Asteroid City. This film was directed by Wes Anderson, and this was actually kind of a surprise for me, just because, I don't know, this film felt a lot more kind of meta in terms of its exploration, which I don't see quite as often from Wes Anderson in this way. The way that the movie kind of builds and kind of layers in very subtly is something that I'm not sure how audiences will really take to it, if they might find it to be a little bit boring, maybe a little bit confusing, even maybe a little bit shallow or empty. But for me, I actually found it to be interesting because as it goes on, you start to see, okay, I see what's going on here. I love the idea of this kind of apocalyptic feeling, all of these people, together in a place they normally wouldn't be, and they witness a crazy event, and because of that, it kind of reverberates, and we see how it affects different people and their interactions. And knowing, possibly the end of the world, doom, it's all coming. We have no control over our lives. And so how do we live in these moments now? And how do we talk to each other? How do we interact with each other in this moment? And I think also Wes is kind of exploring, again, like I said, it's very meta. So I think he's exploring a little bit about himself, perhaps, just as a writer, as a creator. There are kind of a lot of satirical elements so far as exploring the meta-ness, I think, of what it means to be a director and an actor, and creating, in here it's a play, but it could be also a director of a film, and how drama serves life, or how life serves drama, and how all of that is very complicated. And I see a lot of movies that are meta, that are kind of very satirical and witty and all of that, and yet this one, even though it has those elements, it also is taking it very seriously in kind of a melancholy way that I found to be, again, quite curious. But this world, this Asteroid City, the way that it is built, and certain characters you really do fall in love with. And even despite kind of the melancholy nature of it, it's still very bright and beautiful and creative, and just every inch of the frame has such detail because it is Wes Anderson, and just every line of dialogue is interesting to listen to. So yeah, I guess it just kind of depends on what kind of Wes Anderson you prefer. For me, I didn't find it as emotionally engaging as certain films, but then at the same time, I found that just sort of leak into the film slowly, and it affected me later on. So I do recommend, if you are a Wes Anderson fan, to give this film a chance, because, if you're a big fan of his, I can see you possibly really liking it. And I'm very interested to see how people respond to it in the future and whether or not it grows in people's minds as well. I mean, for me, I think it's a little bit fresh. I just saw it about a week ago, but I keep thinking about it, and you know, it has me wanting to kind of dive back into the Wes Anderson world more often. But that is my video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know what some of your favorite movies are so far this year, and let me know what I need to see. I'm going to plug my website. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are fantastic. Guys, thank you so much for your support, and welcome to the new members. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.